Welcome to Confident Calm and Clutch Car Ride Conversations. I'm your host, Valerie Alston, here to help parents and young athletes spark meaningful dialogue about mental toughness, resilience, and confidence. Whether you're heading to practice, a game, or just running errands, this podcast is your go-to for building stronger relationships and lifelong skills, one car ride at a time. So let's dive in. So today we're going to talk about how to handle conflict with teammates or coaches, because let's be honest, relationships can sometimes be tough, and this is something you're going to have to do. So we're wrapping up our month-long focus on relationships by talking about something that every athlete encounters: conflict. In fact, I could replace athlete with person, right? If you're a human, there's going to be conflict at some point. Whether this is a disagreement with a teammate or a miscommunication with your coach or a parent, conflicts are a normal part of life. But here's the key: how you handle those conflicts can either strengthen or damage that relationship. And if we're trying to build a champion support team, like we talked about last week, you need to be able to maintain that trust and that strong relationship. In this episode, we're going to explore why conflict happens and how to navigate it productively, and how healthy conflict resolution can lead to stronger teams and stronger personal growth. Okay. So why is conflict normal? It's normal because you have two humans who think and feel and experience life differently. And so you're going to have different experiences. And sometimes those two things conflict. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can often arise between people who care very deeply about a shared goal, like winning a game or performing well. However, unresolved conflict or poorly handled conflicts can create a lot of tension, can possibly disrupt team dynamics, and it can harm the relationship. And so the good news is that learning how to manage that conflict is a skill, and it's not going to just benefit you in sport, but also in school and life. So totally normal to have conflict in your life with people. When you don't agree, you have a tiff, whatever, right? Conflict is normal, but it's how you handle it that matters. And so really what's going to help you get past that is good communication, empathy, and the ability to take perspective are the keys to resolving this. So I want to dive into two actionable, is that a word? Action, yes. Two actionable pieces of advice that come from the world: resilience, communication. There's so much. Okay, so here's the first thing. Well, what piece of advice I'll give you is pause, reflect, cool down. And what that means is that when conflict arises, it's really tempting to immediately, especially if emotions are high or running high, immediately react out of either anger or frustration or disappointment or fear, right? And when you're operating from those emotions, it can often escalate the situation. You either say things you didn't mean, you're not able to say the things you need to say or want to say, you yell, you scream. And this is happening for adults and kids, okay? This is not just for the kids. So what we would recommend is that instead, as it's fresh and currently happening and emotion is already high, what you want to do is pause. And pause, you need to take a deep breath and you need to acknowledge what you're feeling. You need to step back before you say anything that could potentially ruin the relationship or add more to the conflict instead of trying to solve it, okay? So the first thing you got to do is pause and take a big old deep breath. Maybe if you need to count to 10, that's cool, okay? But pause is the first skill. Now, the second part of that is to reflect. You really need to ask yourself, what's really bothering you about the situation? Is it the situation itself? Is it a preconceived notion you had in your head that person isn't living up to? Is it a standard that was violated? Is it just you're feeling a certain way, right? Really asking yourself, what's really bothering me about this situation? Or am I reacting to something else? Was I already cranky? And the fact that my teammate jokingly came in and said, "What's up, loser?" when they're just being silly and goofy, if you're already having a bad day and you snap at them, it wasn't actually them calling you a loser that made you snap, right? You were already emotionally drained, all that kind of stuff. So really that reflection piece is trying to figure out for you, where's the conflict coming from? Why are you upset, frustrated, annoyed, angry, whatever that is? Okay. And once you have that answer, you have to cool down and allow yourself the time to compose yourself, to calm your emotions, and more importantly, get a clear idea of what you actually need to communicate to that other person. So that cool down phase is not just you calming down, it's thinking through, what do I need to say? And do I need to say anything? Because if it's the example of your friend going, "What, loser?" and you're just like, right, okay, that actually wasn't them. There's nothing you maybe need to go apologize, but right, there's nothing they did wrong, especially if that's how they always say hi. Clearing your mind and assessing like what actually needs to be communicated. Okay, so an example of this, if you're frustrated because a teammate didn't pass the ball during a game, avoid calling them out in the heat of the moment. Instead, what you want to wait is till you've paused, you've reflected, you've cooled down, and you're going to wait till after the game and reflect on how you feel and then approach them calmly to discuss it. Okay. And so we're going to dive into a second tactic in this next piece that will help you then what do you say to that person. Okay. So the second piece of advice when you are needing to handle conflict is to use empathy and perspective taking. And so what we're trying to do is understand another person's perspective on that issue or on the situation. And simply by putting ourselves in their shoes and trying to understand their point of view, what we're doing is we're, instead of assuming negative intentions so that they're out to get you or whatever, is that we're trying to see the situation from their point of view. We're trying to understand what was maybe their intent, or was there negative intent, positive intent, but we're putting ourselves in their shoes and we're saying, what just happened? And if I was them, what maybe was I seeing or experiencing? Okay. Because that gives us information that maybe we were in the wrong, right? We don't know yet until you have the conversation. It's not going to be exact, but it's an important first step. And then what we want to do with the perspective taking is really make sure that we're using I statements to communicate our feelings without blaming somebody else. And here's a couple things of how that would work. So with empathy, you want to ask yourself, all right, why might they have acted this way? What pressures or challenges could they be facing right now that is the reason why we're having this conflict? Okay, so you're going to get answers to those questions. You're going to brainstorm ideas. You're going to also, that perspective taking piece is, how might this situation look from their perspective, right? So when my buddy came up and said, "Oh, what up, loser?" and I barked at him, I bit his head off. Imagine what that was like for them as they just walked in and they're just sillily making up a word, saying hello, and you bite their head off. Like, how do you think that make them feel, right? So an I statement is, instead of saying, "You never pass me the ball," to our initial question, or if you were at a teammate who didn't pass you the ball, instead of saying, "You didn't pass me the ball, what the heck?" you're saying, or "You never pass me the ball." Instead, you want to say, I statement, "I feel frustrated when I didn't get the ball because I thought I was in a good position to score." So now what you're doing is you're still sharing, there might have been a tactical error on that person's part, right? But you're not blaming them. You're not accusing them of, "You never passed the ball to me." You're not exaggerating. You're not saying you're a terrible teammate. You're saying, "Hey, when this happened, I felt frustrated and I thought I was in a good position. What's up? What's going on?" They might tell you something. I didn't see you, man. I flat out missed you. I didn't see you." Okay, different thing. And they might say, "Okay, so I saw you, but actually what I was seeing from the defense is they were doing X, Y, Z, and I thought it would be strategically, I thought this was the right decision." Whatever, you're going to hear something. But by saying I and owning what you felt, is you're not attacking that other person, and then you're opening up the opportunity for dialogue. Okay. So for example, let's say that you're upset with your parents or coach because of some feedback that they gave you. So instead of shutting down and feeling defensive, you want to ask them for clarification using the pause, reflect, cool down, and then empathy and perspective. All right. You want to say something like, "Hey, I'd like to understand what you mean by this feedback so that I can improve." Right? This shows that you're open to growing, willing to work through the issue, but you're acknowledging that, "Hey, I'm feeling that feedback's really tough to hear right now." Okay. So those are some examples. Those are some ideas. And so we're going to dive into the conversations here, what I'd like you to talk about in the car. Again, quick reminder, there are no wrong answers. So Whatever's true for you, state it, talk about it. Make sure you take turns listening and talking. Try to remove as many distractions as you can. And remember that you can pause after each individual question and talk about it, or you can just listen to all of them and have a conversation at the end. All right, so let's dive into the first question. This first question is for the athletes specifically. Can you think of a time when you had a conflict with a teammate or a coach? And if so, how did you handle it? Okay. How did that go in previous conflicts? And if it went well or it went poorly, that's okay. There's no judgment here, but just what do you think? And if it didn't go well, what would you do differently next time? Now that hindsight's 2020, right? Now that you look back, how could you have handled it differently next time? Parents, have you experienced a conflict in your own life that you resolved in a productive way? And what did you learn from it? What do you think your kid needs to know about that experience so they can learn how to handle conflict better? Right? Question 3, together, what are some strategies that we can use as a family to address conflicts more calmly and respectfully? Now, you might be amazing at this in your family. I don't know. That's okay. I suspect we are not awesome because we tend to take stuff out on family members. So anyway, what are some strategies that you can use as a family to address conflicts more calmly and respectfully? And our fourth question together, I want you all to discuss, how can understanding somebody else's perspective help you resolve the conflict in the future? Okay, so again, brainstorm together as you go. All right, y'all, that is our conversation for today. Thank you so much for joining me on Confident, Calm, and Clutch Car Ride Conversations. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a moment and share it with other parents and coaches who could use a little extra inspiration on the go. If you'd like more information and tips and tricks about mental toughness training, you can join my newsletter at www.confidentcalmclutch.com/newsletter for exclusive tips and tools. And if you'd like specific help on building mental toughness, consider checking out my book, Confident, Calm, and Clutch, How to Build Confidence and Mental Toughness for Young Athletes Using Sports Psychology. And again, the link will be in the show notes. All right, y'all. Remember to keep that conversation rolling, and let's make that car ride count. See you later.